Last Saturday, somewhere between one town and the next, my grandson Adrian glanced up from his window seat and changed my world. It wasn't a long look, just a quiet, steady meeting of eyes that said more than words ever could. One train car, 2 paper cups of coffee, a sky the color of pewter, and a secret I'd carried for years, and then everything shifted. If you've ever felt your heart unlock in a single moment, you know exactly what I mean. Keep listening because what happened next surprised even me. Before I begin, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Chicago, Phoenix, Dallas, a small town tucked behind a cornfield. Wherever you are, I want to picture you there with your own cup of something warm while I tell you this. The morning started with that particular kind of Midwestern light that makes everything look both hopeful and a little worn out, like an old photo kept too long on a refrigerator door. We were settled into a pair of seats that faced each other, the table between us slick and cool, polished by 1,000 elbows, and the clatter of 1,000 plastic forks. Adrian Microenson had his backpack by his feet and one sneaker resting on the edge of the strap, a habit he'd had since he was little, as if anchoring himself to home even while he traveled. He's grown taller this year, too tall for the shirts I bought him last spring, but he still does that anchoring trick without thinking. He had his earbuds in, not blasting just enough for me to hear the faint ghost of a beat now and then. Every time a town slipped by, grain silos, a water tower, a dog in a backyard chasing nothing, he would turn his face to the window and commit it to memory. Adrian is a watcher. He always has been. When he was 5, he'd sit on the porch with me and name the colors of the evening like he was giving the sky a roll call. Pimmin, ash, brass, bruised blue. At 5 or 15, he doesn't just see, he notices. And sometimes being noticed is the kindest thing a person can do for you. We were heading south to see my daughter, his mother. There are kind versions of that sentence and there are sharp ones. The true version holds both. The last few years have been like a road under construction, down to one lane, full of orange cones and sudden stops, people trying to merge who aren't quite sure how. My daughter and I love each other with the same ferocity that makes us misunderstand each other. There have been words. There has been silence. There have been long stretches of doing what the weather does, changing and refusing to admit it. This trip was my idea. I called it a visit. In my chest, it felt like an apology, a necessary one, the kind you make when you finally understand the shape of your own mistakes. Want the aisle? Nah, Adrian had asked when we boarded, his hand already on the seat back like a gentleman in a black and white movie. He calls me Nana with a warmth that makes the word feel like a soft blanket thrown over a cold chair. No, sweetheart. I like to see where we've been, I told him, tapping the window seat. He smiled at that. A boy a few rows ahead of us was showing a conductor a crumpled ticket. Across the aisle, a couple in their 70s shared a crossword. Their heads leaned close like the peaks of a heart drawn in pencil. Someone's carry-on squeaked in protest as it was wedged overhead. Coffee drifted through the air, burnt friendly. The train hummed alive under our shoes. A big animal with places to go. Grandma, he said after a while, removing one earbud, but leaving the other dangling. You okay? It was an ordinary question. The sort adults flick away with a joke or a shrug, but what made it extraordinary was the way he asked it. No impatience, no expectation that I would handle it gracefully and quickly. He had both elbows on the table, fingers steepled as if we were about to discuss something important, and he was ready to listen all the way through. His look said, I've got time. His look said, I won't fix you. His look said, if you put it on the table, I'll help you carry it. And here is where I admit the thing I'd been planning to do. I was going to keep it light. I had 100 weather safe topics in my pocket. I'd talk about the diner pies that used to cost $1. I'd ask about his science project, the one with the cardboard volcano and dry ice. I'd tell a road story about his late grandfather Daniel who could change a tire in a suit and somehow never get a spot on the cuffs. I had packed a whole picnic of harmless conversation cut into bite-sized pieces. That was my plan. Instead, I watched the landscape flatten into gold stubble and tiny white farmhouses and realized I had been teaching myself to be small, not gentle. Small. There's a difference. I'd confused silence for peace and politesse for love. That's the thing about being raised to hold your breath. Sometimes you forget you're allowed to exhale. I'm nervous, I told him. The words surprised me by being honest right away, like a bird that had been waiting behind my ribs for years, and finally found an open window. About Mom, he said, no judgment, just a gentle map pin in the middle of the truth. About me with your mom, I said, about how I show up. I wish I'd been softer when she needed soft and stronger when she needed strong. You know how sometimes you pick the right shoes for a walk, but the wrong jacket for the rain? It's like that. I can see too late. I dressed wrong for the weather a lot of the time. He looked at me for a long second. There it was. The look, patient, steady. A kind of love that holds the door open without touching your back. My eyes prickled. I looked down at the little trash circle cut into the table and watched sunlight slide over the metal rim like a coin. I think you're doing the thing now, Adrian said. The corner of his mouth twitched. Like choosing a better jacket. We laughed. It broke the tension the way rain breaks a heat wave. Hiss, relief, the smell of something clean. He told me about his own weather. There have been rough weeks at school. Not scary rough, not headline rough, but the kind that make you doubt your shape. A gym coach who thinks volume equals leadership. A kid in math who sneers when he answers too quickly. Small stuff, people would say, which is the worst thing to say to someone who is feeling a thing for the first time. There's no such thing as small the first time. You have to outgrow it for it to shrink. We made a pact then right there at that shiny table. We would talk with permission and with care. I said I might share something that's messy. If it's too much, you tell me and I'll put it back on the shelf for later. He said if I say something clumsy, you can ask me to try again. We agreed that listening is a gift you give on purpose, not a tax you pay while waiting to talk. We agreed to ask before fixing. It was in its own way an agreement between equals, not because our years are equal, of course, but because respect is a level ground you choose to stand on together. I told him a story about his mother at 12, the year she wanted to cut her hair short. And I said no because I was scared of the world reading her wrongly. I wanted to protect her from it, so I tried to make her look like the kind of girl the world is kindest to. The story tastes like shame even now. I see myself standing in the bathroom doorway, arms folded, telling a beautiful kid that beautiful has rules. I apologized to him for that, which is a strange sentence when you think about it. Apologizing to your grandson for the bruise you gave his mother years before he was born. But spilling that truth out onto the table felt like finally sweeping the corners under the couch that had been collecting dust for years. You always think guests won't look there. The people who love you always look there. Adrian listened. He didn't make the adult face, the one that says, I'm listening responsibly. He made his own face, which is open and curious and a little stubborn. I know that stubbornness, it has my mother's eyes. When I finished, he said, I think Mom is going to like to hear that. He said it like a plain fact, something useful to put in her pocket. The conductor came by again, this time telling us we'd have a 10-minute stop at a small station whose name sounded like a last name. We stretched our legs. On the platform, a teenager in a Letterman jacket kissed his girlfriend Ava on the forehead. And the gesture was so sweet, my eyes stung again. Adrian bought a pack of gum from the vending machine and gave me the first piece. We chewed in companionable silence, the snap of mint, a bright little metronome, counting the seconds. Then we climbed back aboard. As the train started again, another low animal hum working its way through the car, I asked him a question I'd been afraid to ask. What did he want from me that he wasn't getting? He tilted his head, thinking. The light shifted. Fields became forest. A hawk traced a lazy figure 8 outside our window. Sometimes, he said, you do that thing where you answer a worry by telling a story about how you survived something worse. And I get the point, but it kind of makes me feel like I have to be tough before I'm ready. I want to be allowed to be new at things. It landed with a soft thud in my chest, the exact weight of what he needed. I thought of all the times I'd toughened the tone when tenderness would have been braver. We think the older we are, the more courage is in the armor. Maybe the real courage is putting the armor down and saying, okay, I'm here for this exact weather, not the storm I'm inventing. You're right, I said. I can do that better, he smiled. The landscape outside changed from trees to a place where the land sat low and the water sat high, sloths flashing between cattails like pieces of sky fallen to earth. The train leaned a little into a curve, and we both braced our palms on the table as if we were sailors. Somewhere behind us, a baby laughed at the sensation, that pure bell sound only babies have. Want to hear something I've never told anyone? I asked. He straightened, not out of drama but out of care, the way you might raise the head of a lamp to cast a better light. I used to think your mom's anger was proof I failed, I said. But sometimes anger is just pain with its coat on. And sometimes the bravest thing a person does is admit they need help getting the coat off. I told him I had started seeing a counselor, that we were practicing new words for old weather. We were learning to say I'm flooded instead of saying something sharp. We were practicing the pause. We were building a smaller Kinder toolbox. He didn't clap. He didn't give me a gold star. He said, "That sounds hard," and squeezed my hand over the table. 1, 2, then let go. Because he knows I like brief touch and then space. The respect in that small gesture filled the whole car. The trip unspooled like ribbon. Town names clicked by on the digital sign. The sky opened into something washed and clean. When we got sandwiches from the cafe car, he offered me the bigger half. I traded him my pickle for his tomato without speaking. We've been doing that for years. He told me about the art teacher who uses kindness like a superpower. How just her voice can settle a rowdy class. I told him about the nurse who sat with me 3 hours the day. His grandfather Daniel had his second surgery. How she braided her hair too tight and had a crease in her forehead by noon. How she ended her shift by telling me the smallest true thing: the body wants to heal. By the time the conductor announced our last stop before the city, the air in our little corner of the world felt different. Like when a storm has moved on, not because the sky is blue, but because you can finally smell the dirt again. We had done something brave together. We had chosen honesty with permission. That's what changed me. The consent, not just the speaking, but the agreement to speak in a way that took care of both of us. I didn't pour my heart out on the table and demand he mop it up. He didn't throw a teenager's verdict at me like a stone. We met in the middle of the table and built a little bridge of questions and patience. "Do you want to call Mom when we get there?" he asked, "or on the way?" It was his look as he asked, a look that said, "I trust you to decide, and I'll stand next to you either way." That finally knocked something loose in me. People talk about love like a dramatic rescue. Lights flashing, sirens. Sometimes love is a kid asking a practical question with the faith that whatever you choose will be okay. On the way I said, my voice did that small flip it used to do when I set a boundary or made a promise. The good kind of flip, the resetting kind. "Would you sit with me while I call?" He nodded. No flourish. Just that steady yes. The station arrived. A long low roof, a row of benches, a clock that ran a few minutes slow. We stood, gathered our things, shuffled with the patient herd toward the door. Outside, the cool air tasted faintly of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Adrian shifted his backpack on his shoulder, and we found a quiet spot near a planter filled with dusty lavender. "Ready?" he asked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my daughter's name. I stared at it, a heartbeat too long. The way you stand at the edge of a pool telling yourself the water's fine. Adrian didn't rush me. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. The line clicked. I drew a breath that felt like the first honest inhale I'd taken in years. And with my grandson's quiet, steady look holding me up like a hand at the small of my back, I said her name. The call connected, and hearing my daughter's voice after all that waiting was like opening a door into a room where the light has been off too long. It startled me, but it also warmed me. She said hello with that familiar sharpness, like she was bracing herself. For years we've both spoken like people holding umbrellas in a storm, protective, ready to deflect. But this time, before she could build her wall higher, I answered gently, steady, letting her hear something new in my voice. Adrian stayed beside me, quiet, a hand on the strap of his backpack, grounding me. That look of his was still there, steady and patient, and it gave me courage to stand on softer ground. I told her I missed her, not in the casual way people toss the word, but in the truer way. I missed her laughter, her questions, the way she used to call me late at night, just to tell me about a book she was reading. My daughter didn't say much at first, just breathed into the phone. But breathing is a language too, and hers told me she hadn't hung up because she wanted to believe me. I said I was sorry for the ways I had misunderstood her, for the times I had mistaken her anger for disrespect instead of pain. She didn't rush in to forgive me, but she didn't hang up either. Sometimes the absence of silence is its own gift. When the call ended, Adrian and I walked through the station together. The city noise wrapped around us. Horns, footsteps, voices carrying pieces of their lives past ours. But in that chaos I felt calm, almost lighter, as though confessing had unlocked something in me I didn't know I was carrying. Adrian kept glancing up at me, not needing words. His look saying, "See, you did it." That unspoken bond between us was stronger now. a quiet rope pulling me forward when my own legs wanted to stall. At dinner that night, when we finally sat across from my daughter, I saw her eyes soften for the first time in years. The room was filled with clinking silverware, chatter from nearby tables, and the faint smell of bread just out of the oven. But for me, the whole evening narrowed down to that moment, her looking at me not like an opponent, but like someone she might trust again. Adrian sat between us, the bridge, his presence, keeping the table steady. We didn't fix everything that night. Life doesn't bend that easily. But we started. We asked real questions. We laughed once, almost surprised at ourselves. I even told a story about her childhood that made her roll her eyes and then reluctantly smile. It was messy and imperfect, and yet I left the restaurant with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. On the trip back, as the train rocked us through fields and towns, I thought about how a single look had carried me all this way. Adrian's look had reminded me that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes like a lantern in a dark room, small, steady, enough to make you see your own hands again. His quiet strength taught me that connection isn't about who talks loudest, but about who listens with respect. I realized then that this journey wasn't just about me and my daughter. It was also about me and him, about what kind of grandmother I could still become. I don't need to be perfect. I need to be present. I need to give him space to be new, space to stumble, space to grow without rushing him into toughness. And maybe that's what love is at its core. Standing beside someone while they figure out who they are without pushing them to be anything else. As the train slowed into the familiar station near home, Adrian nudged me lightly. "You did good, Nana," he said. Just those words, and then he grinned, that easy grin only a 15-year-old can give. My eyes filled before I could stop them. His look on the way down the platform was the same as it had been that morning. Calm, steady, safe. The look that had changed me. That trip didn't erase our past, but it gave me something better. A future I could walk into with honesty, patience, and courage. And every time I think back to that quiet car, the farmland rolling by, and my grandson's eyes meeting mine, I know that love doesn't need to shout to change a life. Sometimes it only needs to look at you long enough for you to see yourself differently. And that's how on one simple trip, my grandson's look changed my